Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are opening up a file that I suspect most people haven't really looked at since they were maybe 16 years old.
Oh, I believe that.
And if they have, it was probably to see, Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman shouting in a courtroom. We're analyzing William Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice.
I have to admit, when I saw this on the schedule, I had this flashback to a very dusty classroom and a teacher going on about iambic pentameter. But I know you, and I know that's not why we're here. We are not here to discuss rhyme schemes.
No, not at all. We are doing something completely different. We are going to treat this play not as a piece of literature, but as a simulation.
A simulation.
A simulation of a very specific economic and legal operating system.
An operating system like Windows or Linux, but for 16th century Venice. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. I mean, think about it. If you strip away the Elizabethan roughs and all the poetic language, this play is actually a terrifyingly accurate model of how a system functions when it values contracts over people.
Wow.
It runs on a very specific code, and today we're going to debug it.
Okay, so we're not asking the high school questions. We're not asking, is Shylock a villain or is Antonio a hero?
No, those are binary moral questions, and honestly, they distract from the structural reality of what's going on.
So what's the real question, then?
The systemic question we are grappling with today is this. How do legal systems transform moral judgment into procedure, and why does justice become cruelty when law is treated as neutral?
That is a heavy question. It sounds less like we're talking about a play and more about the machinery of the state itself.
We are, because the machinery in this play is what produces the characters. We're looking at how institutions, in this case, the Republic of Venice, prioritize the sanctity of a contract, the written word, above the actual outcome for the human beings involved.
And how fairness can be weaponized.
Exactly. It can be turned into a weapon.
So this isn't just about a pound of flesh. This is about the legal framework that allows someone to even file a motion for a pound of flesh.
Yes.
And the bureaucratic gears that just grind forward and actually consider granting it.
Precisely. This is a map of the machinery that produces both the villain and the hero. And as we're going to see, those labels themselves are structurally manufactured by the system.
Okay, let's boot up the simulation then. I think we need to understand the environment before we can really get the users. Let's talk about Venice. In the source material we looked at, particularly the introduction by Jonathan Bate in the RSC edition, Venice is described as way more than just a city with canals.
Oh, absolutely. Venice is a mechanism. In the context of this play, and really the entire era, Venice is synonymous with one thing: commerce.
Marketplace of the world.
It is. But more importantly, it's a place of strangers.
Strangers. Why is that distinction so important?
Well, think about a typical village economy back then. If you live in a small town in, say, 1590, you trade with your cousin, your neighbor, the blacksmith you've known your entire life.
Right.
You rely on trust, on shared cultural values, on, frankly, social pressure. If your neighbor owes you money, you don't immediately sue them.
No, you talk to them at church, or the whole town finds out and shames them. The social fabric regulates the economy.
Exactly. You get it. If you're a jerk about a debt, the whole town knows, and you lose status, you lose face. But Venice. Venice is a global hub. You have, as the play mentions, Turks and Tartars, people from different nations, different religions, all speaking different languages.
You can't rely on a handshake in that environment.
You can't. You don't have shared cultural values. You might not have a shared God. There's no common ground.
So if you can't rely on trust, what do you rely on?
The contract. The bond. What we would call the rule of law. For Venice to function as this massive economic engine, the law must be absolute. It has to be rigid. If a merchant from Turkey thinks for a second that a Venetian court might rule based on favoritism or, vibes.
They're not going to bring their ships there. They'll go somewhere else.
They won't risk it. The entire economy collapses. So the rigidity isn't a bug in the system.
It's the primary feature.
It is the server architecture that keeps the whole economy online. Commerce depends on credit, and credit depends on the absolute, unwavering enforcement of bonds.
So if the Duke, the ruler, just decides, you know what, this contract is too mean, we're not going to enforce it, what happens?
The credit rating of the entire city drops to 0. Instantly. Trade stops.
Yeah. So the system is designed to be blind to context. It actually has to be.
It has to be. And that baked-in rigidity is precisely what creates the crisis in the play.
Okay, so from the server architecture, let's look at the user interface, the title of the play itself. This is a fascinating bit of editorial framing that's discussed in our sources.
It really is. In 1598, the play was registered in the Stationer's Register, which was, basically the copyright office of its day under a very interesting title.
What was it?
The Merchant of Venice, or otherwise called the Jew of Venice.
Huh. That's ambiguous.
Yeah.
It suggests the titles are almost interchangeable. Shylock or Antonio could be the main character.
It does. It presents an equivalence. But then later in the first folio, the big definitive collection published after Shakespeare's death, the title is locked in. Antonio is the titular merchant.
He gets the top billing.
He does. But here is the data point from our analysis that always shocks people. Antonio has the smallest role of the main protagonists.
Really? I mean, his name is on the cover. You'd think he'd be the lead.
He's on the cover, sure, but if you actually look at the line counts, Portia has about 22% of the lines in the play.
Okay, she's the lead.
Shylock has roughly 13%. Bassanio, his friend, also has about 13%. Antonio.
Let me guess, lower.
He's down at 7%. 7. He's a minor character in terms of sheer volume.
That feels like a glitch in the system. Why name the whole operation after the guy who barely talks?
Because the system centers the insider. It's a systemic choice. Antonio represents the establishment. He's the merchant. He is the one the entire system is built to serve and protect.
Even though Shylock, the Jew, the outsider, is the one who drives the entire plot.
He's the engine of the conflict. He has the most memorable, powerful lines. But the system, and by extension, the title marginalizes him even as he completely dominates the stage.
That is a systemic insight right there. The structure protects the status of the insider, even if they aren't the one doing the heavy lifting. It reminds me of how we name huge buildings after the donors, not the architects or the construction workers.
That is a perfect analogy. The system prioritizes the capital holder. And we have to remember the context this was all happening in. The theater in Elizabethan England wasn't just, a fun night out. It was a moral testing ground.
A public forum.
It was where society worked through its biggest anxieties. And our sources mention the Lopez affair.
I've heard this name before. Rodrigo Lopez.
Yes, the Queen's own doctor. A Portuguese man of Jewish descent who had converted to Christianity. In 1594, just a couple of years before this play was written, he was accused of trying to poison Queen Elizabeth.
And I'm guessing, given the time period, that didn't end well for him.
He was executed, hung, drawn, and quartered. It was a massive, horrifying public spectacle. So the anxiety about aliens, about insiders who are secretly outsiders, about plotters, it was at a fever pitch in London.
So the audience walks into the theater already primed. They're basically running a simulation on the threat in their own heads.
They are. They're ready to see a monster. But here's the twist in the code. The Merchant of Venice is classified as a comedy.
Which always feels so weird to modern audiences. I mean, considering the very real threat of ritual slaughter in a courtroom, it doesn't scream comedy.
It feels weird to us because our modern definition of comedy is funny, but structurally, in the classical sense, comedy is about social integration. And this fits perfectly with a theory from the critic Northrop Frye, which is discussed in our source material.
Okay, let's break that down. This seems important for the system map. Frye's theory.
Right. Frye talks about two opposing worlds in Shakespearean comedy. The city versus the green world.
The city, that's Venice, right?
That's Venice. It's the world of law, money, fathers, restriction. It's a place of anxiety and friction where men are arguing over contracts and interest rates. It's the real world, so to speak.
Okay, so what's a green world?
The green world is Belmont Portia's estate. It's a world of music, romance, a kind of magic, and, importantly, it's run by women. The whole goal of a Shakespearean comedy, structurally, is to move the characters from the harsh, restrictive city to the healing green world.
So the system's objective is social integration. Marriage, harmony, a reset, a happy ending.
Yes, but, and this is the systemic cost that we are really focusing on, to achieve that harmony, the party poopers, the elements that don't fit into that neat resolution, they must be excluded or crushed.
So for the happy ending to happen, Shylock has to be destroyed.
Yes. And structurally, as we'll see, Antonio has to be isolated too. The system restores its order by purging the non-compliant elements. The beautiful, harmonious green world of Belmont is literally built on the wealth that was secured through the trauma of that Venetian trial.
You can't have the party without the purge.
You can't. And that brings us right to our central thesis for this deep dive.
Let's state it clearly.
The play models a legal economic system where contracts replace empathy, procedure replaces judgment, and moral violence is legitimized through technical compliance.
Let's get into the gears of that machine. We've mapped the setting. Now let's map the incentives. Why does this conflict even happen? It all starts with basically a funding round, right?
It does. It all starts with Bassanio. He's a young nobleman, a good friend of Antonio's, and he has what he calls a swelling port.
A swelling port. That sounds
Well,
expensive.
it means he lives way, way beyond his means to maintain his brand. He's broke. But he has a plan to get rich quick.
Let me guess. Hard work, innovation, developing a new trade route to the east.
No. Marriage. He wants to woo Portia, this incredibly rich heiress in Belmont. She is, for all intents and purposes, a venture capital prize. But to go woo her, he needs money to look the part.
He needs to hire a private jet and buy a nice suit, so to speak.
A cynical but very accurate summary. So he goes to his friend Antonio, the merchant, but Antonio is illiquid. All his cash is tied up in his cargo ships at sea.
So they have to go to the alien. They have to go to Shylock.
They do. And this is where the system's incentives get really interesting. Why does Shylock even consider lending them the money? He hates Antonio, and Antonio despises him.
Right, the text is very clear about that.
Antonio spits on Shylock in the street. He calls him a dog. But Shylock lends the money because, in the Venetian system, money is his only lever of power. It's the only language the ruling class understands. It's the only way he can force them to interact with him.
So they sign the bond. 3,000 ducats for 3 months. If it's not repaid on time, Shylock gets to take a pound of Antonio's flesh.
And the poet W.H. Auden had this brilliant analysis of this moment. He suggests that by signing this bizarre, horrifying bond, both Antonio and Shylock are stepping outside the normal rules of society.
How so? What does that mean?
Because it's not really a business transaction anymore. A business transaction is about profit. This is about hazard. Antonio hazards all, as he says. They enter this liminal space of total existential risk. Shylock is essentially buying a futures contract on Antonio's life.
And Antonio agrees because...
Yeah.
Is it just arrogance? He thinks his ships will come in?
Arrogance, for sure. He's completely confident his ships will be back in time. But there's also, I think, a kind of performative martyrdom to it. He wants to show Bassanio just how much he loves him. It's like saying, look, I'm literally risking my heart for you.
So the incentives are all over the place. Bassanio wants status and wealth. Antonio wants love and validation. And Shylock wants... What does he want at this point? Is it just revenge?
You know, at first. Maybe not. Maybe it's just leverage. Maybe he thinks, if I hold this bond over this man's head, for once he'll have to treat me with a shred of respect. But this is where the feedback loop kicks in. This is what we're calling the creation of the villain.
And we have some amazing source material on this, especially from actors who have played the role. I'm thinking of Anthony Sher.
Yes. Anthony Sher describes this very specific loop. It's a cycle of hate, and it's built by the system. The input is Christian hypocrisy. The Christians borrow money with interest all the time, but they condemn Shylock for doing the exact same thing.
Let's pause there because we need to define usury. That's a key term here.
Right. In this era, the church forbade Christians from charging interest on loans. It was considered a sin against nature, this idea of making money breed more money. But the entire economy of Venice needed credit. You can't have global trade without loans.
So you have a theological ban on the one thing the economy absolutely requires to function.
Exactly, a fundamental contradiction. So what does the system do? It outsources the sin. It designated the Jews to do the dirty work of money lending. They were allowed to charge interest because they were already considered outside the Christian community, outside salvation.
So the system creates a necessary role, forces a specific group of people into it, and then hates them for playing that role.
That is a very definition of a systemic trap. So back to that feedback loop. The input is that hypocrisy. The process is abuse. They spit on him, they kick him, they call him a cutthroat dog.
That spitting detail is mentioned so many times in the text, it's incredibly visceral.
It is. It's a symbol of total dehumanization and exclusion. You spit on something you consider trash. So what's the reaction? Shylock hardens. He learns the behavior of his oppressors. There's that famous speech where he says, "The villainy you teach me, I will execute."
He's mirroring the system right back at them.
Yeah.
He's essentially saying, you designed me to be a monster. Okay, I'll be the monster you designed.
Another actor, Henry Goodman, talks about the psychological ghetto. Shylock is physically locked in a ghetto at night. Venice was actually the first city to use the word ghetto, from the Italian for foundry, the area where Jews were confined. But he's also locked in this constant defensive posture. When the system consistently treats you as a subhuman thing, you eventually turn to the only tool you have, the law, to assert that you are, in fact, a person with rights.
Even if the only right you can successfully assert is the right to destroy someone else.
That's the tragedy of it. That is the system's output. Shylock views his revenge as being dearly bought. He says, I have paid for this pound of flesh, it is mine. He's using the language of commerce, the language of property, to justify murder.
That is just chilling. The system has successfully converted moral violence into a simple property dispute.
I own this violence. And let's look at the pivotal moment of the system's design, the absolute supremacy of the contract. Before the trial even starts, the Christians try to buy him off. They offer Shylock money, a lot of money. They offer him 6,000 ducats.
Which is double the original loan. From a purely business perspective, that's a 100% return in 3 months. That is an incredible deal. Why on earth does he refuse it?
Because it's not about the money anymore. He is standing on the freedom of the city. He argues very logically that if the Duke denies him his right to what's written in the bond, then the entire Charter of Venice is invalid. He's hacking the system.
He knows its core principle.
He knows that the system prizes procedural certainty above all else, above morality, above mercy, above common sense.
He's saying, if you break this one contract because you don't like me, you effectively break every contract in Venice.
Exactly. He is holding the entire global economy hostage with its own rules. The law, as it's designed, cannot see that killing Antonio is wrong. It can only see that the signature on the bond is valid.
Which brings us to the enforcement mechanism, the trial scene.
This scene is the centerpiece of the whole simulation. The Duke is there. All the elites of Venice are there. But the Duke, he seems completely useless.
He's the head of state. You'd think he could just step in and say, stop this. This is insane.
But he can't. The Duke is this fascinating figure of systemic failure. He is clearly wildly biased against Shylock. He calls him an inhuman wretch before Shylock even walks into the courtroom.
So the judge is prejudiced from the start.
Completely. But he's also powerless. He's trapped.
Why?
Because he's bound by the city's charter. The Duke basically says, I hate this. This is horrible, but my hands are tied. If he breaks the law to save Antonio, he breaks the international confidence in Venetian markets. So he displaces all his responsibility onto the decree.
It's the ultimate, I was just following procedure defense. Don't look at me, look at the rule book.
It is. And Shylock knows this, and he leverages it perfectly. He holds the system's own legitimacy hostage. He forces the court to confront its own cold logic. If you truly believe in property rights above all else, then you must give me my property, which just so happens to be this man's heart.
So the law, by design, creates a kind of moral blindness.
A total moral blindness.
Yeah.
Until Portia steps in.
Enter the hacker. Portia shows up, but she's dressed as a young male lawyer named Balthazar.
And this disguise is absolutely crucial to understanding the system. The system is so rigid, so broken, that justice cannot be delivered by the actual authorities, like the Duke. It has to be delivered by a trickster, an outsider disguised as an insider.
That's a great point. If the system actually worked, you wouldn't need a woman dressed as a man to trick everyone into saving the day.
Precisely. Her presence proves the system's failure. And she comes in and starts with that incredibly famous speech. The quality of mercy is not strained.
Everyone knows this speech, even if they've never seen the play. It's beautiful rhetoric. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven.
It is beautiful. But let's look at it systemically. Is mercy a right in this court?
No, not at all. She's asking him to choose to be merciful. She's essentially begging him.
Exactly. Mercy is presented as a discretionary privilege of the ruling class. It is not a systemic guarantee. Portia demands mercy from the outsider, from Shylock. She's telling him, you should be better than the law.
But Shylock, of course, refuses. He says, I stand on my bond. I crave the law.
And that's when Portia springs the trap, the loophole.
This bond doth give thee here no jot of blood.
It's a pure technicality. The contract says he can have a pound of flesh, but it doesn't explicitly say he can have any blood. Therefore, if he sheds even one drop of Christian blood, he's breaking another Venetian law.
It's almost laughable. From a modern legal perspective, it's a gotcha moment.
It is a total gotcha. But notice what's happening here. Portia is not winning with a moral argument. She never says killing people is wrong and our society should not permit it. She is winning with the procedural argument. She is out-lawyering him on his own terms.
She uses his own logic, his strict constructionism, against him.
Exactly. She weaponizes compliance. She says, in effect, you want the letter of the law. Fine, you can have the law, but we are going to apply it so strictly, so literally, that it will utterly destroy you.
And it does destroy him. He loses his money, he loses his property, and then the final blow. The conversion.
This is the part of the play that makes modern audiences, physically recoil. The court rules that as part of his punishment, Shylock must convert to Christianity.
Which is a complete and total erasure of his identity.
And while our source material suggests that to an Elizabethan audience, this might have been seen as a favor, saving his soul from eternal damnation structurally, it's forced assimilation. To resolve the conflict, the system demands the complete erasure of the other.
It's not we accept you now, it's become exactly like us or cease to exist.
And that leads us to the final scene, the illusion of the green world. The play ends back in Belmont.
Right, it's a party, there's music playing, the lovers are reunited, the rings are returned, everyone is happy and rich.
But Antonio is there, and you have to notice his position at the end. He's the third wheel, all the other main characters are paired off in marriage, he has no wife. His money is restored, but only by a kind of miracle. His ships just miraculously come back. It's another systemic convenience.
Deus ex machina.
It is, and our sources note that modern directors often stage him as standing alone, isolated at the end of the play. He's still the sad merchant from the very first line of the play.
So the system is affirmed because the alien element Shylock has been neutralized, but the harm is just normalized. The wealth they're all enjoying in Belmont, the rings, the music, the estate, it's all preserved because they successfully and brutally crushed their creditor.
It's a resolution without any repair.
Precisely.
The system reset itself, but the damage is still there.
I want to zoom out a bit and do a formal systems map.
Yeah.
We like to visualize the moving parts for our listeners to really see the architecture of this thing. Let's start with the actors in this economy.
Okay. First, let's identify the creditors, who are represented solely by Shylock.
What's their primary incentive in this system?
Security, and I would argue validation. Shylock uses legal leverage because he has zero social leverage. He can't get invited to dinner with the merchants, so he forces them to meet him in court. He needs the law to prove that he exists and has rights.
Okay, then we have the debtors Antonio and Bassanio.
Their incentive is all about status. Bassanio needs to maintain his brand, his swelling port. They use the system and bend its rules to maintain their social standing. They are the primary beneficiaries of the system, even when they're the ones being irresponsible.
Next up, the enforcers. This would be the Duke and Portia in her disguise.
Right. They represent the machinery of the state. But notice, they mistake legal cleverness for actual justice. Portia wins because she finds a clever loophole, not because she fixes the broken system. They enforce procedure, not ethics.
And what about the public? We have those characters, Solario and Solanio, the guys who are always standing around gossiping.
They are the public or the chorus, and their role is crucial. They reinforce the in-group bias. They're the ones who openly mock Shylock when his daughter runs away with his money. They normalize the daily abuse that feeds that cycle of hate we talked about. They are the social media mob of Venice.
Let's talk about that daughter narrative for a second, because we skipped over it earlier. Jessica.
Right. Shylock's daughter, Jessica, elopes with a Christian man, Lorenzo, and when she leaves, she steals a significant amount of Shylock's money and jewels.
Systemically, how is this event framed?
Well, the Christian characters frame it as a beautiful romance, a liberation story. She saved herself from her cruel Jewish father. But if you just look at the raw data of the event from Shylock's perspective, his child was stolen. His wealth was stolen. And the society around him creates a narrative that he is the villain for being angry about it.
So it reinforces that core narrative of the other. The Jew is framed as the source of disruption, even when the Christians are the ones breaking contracts of family and stealing from him.
It completely masks the reality of the situation. The Christians are financially irresponsible, and in this case, predatory, but the narrative that the system generates paints them as the heroes.
Okay, let's look at the tools being used within the system.
The most obvious one is the bond. It's a weaponized contract. It's a tool that converts a financial debt into a physical, bodily liability.
Then you have the trial,
Which is a form of ritualized conflict resolution that's designed to legitimize state power. It makes the violence look orderly, civilized. It puts a fancy robe on a brutal act.
and disguise. You mentioned this earlier.
It's a crucial tool because it shows the system's flaws. The system is too rigid to handle the truth. Portia has to lie about her identity to effect any change. If she walked into that court as a woman, she would not have been heard. The system requires deception to arrive at what it calls justice.
That is a damning indictment. I mean, if your operating system works properly, you shouldn't need a hack or a patch just to save someone's life.
Exactly. The need for the hack proves the code is broken.
And finally, let's map that feedback loop one more time, very clearly.
Okay. Debt leads to enforcement. Enforcement leads to punishment. Punishment leads to moral justification, the narrative that he deserved it. And that justification leads to system validation. Because Shylock was crushed and order was restored, the Venetians feel that their system works. They don't see the cruelty, they see the victory.
So why does a system like this persist? Why doesn't it just collapse under the weight of its own hypocrisy?
Because it successfully ejected the threat. Shylock is gone. He's been neutralized. But the underlying rules of Venetian commerce, they didn't change one bit. Interest will still be charged. Bonds will still be signed. The system protected itself by sacrificing the one individual who took its rules too literally.
That is a really profound point. Shylock's crime, in a way, wasn't that he was evil. It was that he believed in their law too much.
He believed the law was actually neutral. He learned the hard way that law is almost always a tool of the dominant culture.
So let's bring this into the present day. We're not in 16th century Venice. We don't trade in decades. But these patterns, I have to say, they feel uncomfortably familiar.
They are incredibly deeply relevant. We see this core conflict between procedural justice and substantive justice playing out all the time.
Okay, break that down for us. I'm 5.
Okay. Procedural justice is all about the process. Did we follow the rules? Did we fill out the paperwork correctly? Is the signature valid? Did you miss the filing deadline by 1 minute? It's about the how.
Got it.
Substantive justice is about the outcome. Is the result moral? Is it right? Is it actually fair in a human sense? It's about the what.
And we live in a world that absolutely loves procedure.
We do. Think about something like mandatory minimum sentencing in the legal system. A judge might look at a defendant and say, this person made a mistake, they don't deserve 10 years in prison for this. But the bond, the law itself says 10 years. Procedure overrides judgment. The judge becomes the duke, saying, my hands are tied.
Or think about the terms of service for any tech company. You scroll to the bottom, you click agree, and suddenly you've signed away your right to sue or all of your privacy rights.
Exactly. I stand here on my bond. A bank or a tech giant can say, hey, you agreed to it, it's in the contract. It might be perfectly legal, but is it just? We confuse those two things all the time. We have this deep-seated belief that if something is legal, it must also be moral.
And this play just blows that idea up. We also see the issue of so-called neutral frameworks producing deeply unequal outcomes.
The law loves to claim that it's blind. It's a neutral mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as we see so clearly in the play, it produces wildly disparate impacts based on who knows how to manipulate the technicalities. Portia knows the drop of blood trick. Shylock does not.
The insider knows how to work the levers of power. The outsider just gets crushed by them. This sounds like the difference between having an expensive corporate law firm and a public defender.
Precisely. If you can afford to hire the Portia, the expert who knows all the loopholes and exceptions, you can win on a technicality. If you can't, you get the Shylock treatment. You get the full, unyielding weight of the law brought down on you.
And that brings us to the last point. Mercy as privilege.
This is such a big takeaway. Our systems often rely on individual benevolence. A judge happening to be in a good mood, or a governor deciding to grant a pardon, or a CEO magnanimously deciding to waive a late fee rather than on structural fairness.
And we celebrate those moments as if they're proof the system works. Oh, look, the big company forgave the little guy's debt.
We do. But if your justice system depends on the quality of mercy randomly dropping from heaven, you don't actually have a justice system. You have a lottery. Justice shouldn't be a gift that the powerful grant to the powerless. It should be the baseline operating condition.
And that connects so directly to what we try to do here on Crisis in Perception. We always try to move the conversation from individual blame to systems analysis.
Because it is so easy to blame Shylock. He's scary. On stage, he's sharpening a knife on the sole of his shoe. The actor's doing a great job of being terrifying.
Or it's easy to blame Antonio for being so reckless with his money. Thought buying avocado toast and cargo ships.
Right. But it's much harder, and I think much more necessary, to see the Venetian economic system that required a Shylock to exist in the first place. The system needed someone to lend money. It needed someone to take the moral fall for charging interest.
It designed the role, and then it cast him in it.
And it required Antonio to risk his life for status. If the system didn't value these swelling ports and these lavish displays of wealth, Bassanio wouldn't have needed the loan in the first place. The system pushes everyone towards the cliff.
And the ghetto concept is central to this.
The interviews in our source material talk about the physical ghetto, but also that mental, psychological ghetto. When you design a system that methodically excludes a group of people, you create the very monster that you claim to fear. You manufacture the permission structure for violence.
Permission structure, that's a really key phrase. Can you expand on what that means?
Legality creates permission. Shylock feels completely justified in seeking Antonio's life because the law, the bond, supports him. The pound of flesh is mine, he says. He feels moral because he is being legal.
Yeah. And the Christians on the other side.
They feel completely justified in destroying him because he's alien and because he threatened one of their own. The law gives everyone a shield to hide behind while they commit acts of cruelty.
And Portia's fairness at the end is actually just a trap.
It is procedural fairness used as a weapon of destruction. She gives him exactly what the bond allows. No more, no less. If the scale do turn, but in the estimation of a hair, thou diest. This is strict constructionism being used as a tool of total elimination.
It's weaponized compliance. It's like working to rule in a labor dispute.
Exactly. It shows that following the rules to the letter can be just as aggressive, just as violent as breaking them.
So as we wrap up this really intense deep dive, let's try to summarize. What is the final revelation here?
I think The Merchant of Venice reveals that law is not the opposite of violence. Very often, law is simply the method of violence.
That's a hard pill to swallow. We're raised to think that law is what stops violence.
It creates a monopoly on violence and gives it a civilized veneer. The play ends with that comedy, structure, marriage, money, restoration. But the systems analysis reveals a deep tragedy of assimilation and erasure.
And Antonio, what's his final position?
Antonio is safe. He's rich again, but he's solitary. He's still the sad merchant. The system successfully protects assets, but it alienates humans. He's safe, but he is utterly alone.
Which leaves us with a final provocation for you, the listener, to think about.
Does a system that requires the total destruction of a nonconformist in order to achieve harmony actually function? Or is that harmony just a delayed crisis? If your peace depends on crushing the outsider, is it really peace, or is it just a pause in the war?
Something to think about the next time you click I agree on a terms of service agreement.
Indeed.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.